You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. This week, my guest is former Major League Baseball catcher and 2013 World Series champion, Ryan Lavarnway. Ryan played in parts of 10 MLB seasons and for 8 big league teams. He also played for Team Israel in the 2017 World Baseball Classic and the 2020 Olympics. Now, Ryan's story is quite unique. He went to Yale University, a school that's produced more U.S. presidents than big league hitters. While at Yale, he led all of college baseball in batting average and slugging percentage and was drafted in the 6th round of the 2008 MLB draft by the Boston Red Sox. From there, Ryan experienced an extraordinary number of career twists and turns that tested his resilience and pushed his never-give-up mindset to the max. Listen to this. Over the course of Ryan's 10-year MLB career, he was called up, sent down to the minors, traded, or released 26 times. He did it all playing the catcher position, one of the most complex and multifaceted roles in all of sports. Catching requires a ton of preparation, game planning, and mental focus, as well as an ability to develop productive working relationships with different pitchers, all who each have their own unique personality and pitching approach. Catcher is also one of the most physically demanding positions in sports due to the wear and tear it puts on the knees and the day in, day out bruising from foul tips and errant swings that comes with the position. Ryan and I recently caught up to explore his career and the success secrets that made him one of the game's most resilient players, and as he puts it, really, really good at not quitting over the course of his 15-year pro career. In our conversation, Ryan shared practical advice on improving mental focus, navigating new environments, and how to spot subtle things in people's body language and communication that can actually have a massive impact on your success. This conversation is filled with lessons to help you maximize your potential in anything. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Ryan Lavarnway. So, I want to go back to your college days. You've said that you were never supposed to be a major leaguer, according to conventional wisdom. You went to a college, and you've stated this, you went to a college that has produced more U.S. presidents than big league hitters. You went to Yale University. What went into that decision? And at that point, did you think it was ever possible that you become a Major League Baseball player?
Well, thanks for reading my article. I can tell exactly where you got that quote from because I know I wrote that recently. But the biggest thing that I'll tell you is that I did not do my research before I went to Yale. Because from the time I was 5 years old and started playing baseball, in my head, I was going to become a Major League Baseball player. Without a doubt, there was no backup plan. And it was just going to happen. And I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't think of the little steps that I needed to check off along the way. I just knew that that was where I was going. And I was not highly recruited out of high school. I was recruited to UC Davis and then a bunch of Ivy League schools because I was playing outfield and I'm the slowest runner on the planet. But I could hit. I could always hit. That's like the one skill that I had on the field. And when I got recruited to Yale, I remember receiving the voicemail on our house phone, and I like jumped up and did the fist pump like in the movies and hit my hand on the ceiling. I was so excited because it's Yale. I never thought about from Southern California going to Ivy League school, and I just rolled with it. I went on a visit. I loved it. It wasn't until like 5 years ago, when my career was 2/3 of the way over, that I learned that I was the first big league hitter from Yale. I didn't even know that.
I didn't know that either. I knew there were some pitchers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Ron Darling and Craig Breslow are two pitchers, and Breslow has been amazing for me in my life. He's 7 years older, so we didn't overlap at Yale, but we were teammates in Boston. We were teammates on Team Israel. He's a resource for me now that he's in the Cubs front office. But yeah, I didn't know I was the first one.
Well, sometimes, it's better to be naive, right?
I guess.
And not know that conventional wisdom would say that you're going to have to be a trailblazer to get out of Yale and play Major League Baseball. But you said you could hit, and at Yale, you sure did. You led all of college baseball in batting average one season with you batted 467. You slugged 873 in 2007. I mean, some extraordinary numbers. Yale's baseball coach, John Super, said that you are possibly the hardest worker that he's ever had on a team. Where did the work ethic come from? Has the work ethic always been something that's a part of you? Where did you develop that?
So some of that comes from my dad, and some of that comes from being a late bloomer, I think. I was never the biggest. I certainly was never the fastest or the strongest. But my dad always said, like, if you do your best, that will be enough. And I've had like catchphrases in my own head, at least throughout my whole life, of like, if you're good enough, they will find you no matter where you are. And that's another thing of going to Yale, right? It's not a traditional baseball school, but I told myself, if you're good enough, they'll find you. And you have to be so good that they can't ignore you. These are, I've made t-shirts with these catchphrases on them. And it's something I always told myself. So I always wanted to be my best. And that was what really drove me, was let's pursue the best. Let's try to eat the best. Let's try to make sure that I'm working out so that I can be my best. And what works on your podcast and what you talk about with the mental side is, what do I need to do between my ears to be my best as well?
Ryan, I'm curious. You talked about in high school being an outfielder. You mentioned that you were maybe the slowest baseball player on the planet in terms of foot speed. When did you transition to catcher, and what was that experience like?
So I caught growing up, but another thing my dad always said was, I don't care if you're the second best player in the entire world at your position. If the first best player in the world plays the same position and he's on your team, you better be able to play somewhere else. And that was the case in high school. His name is Sammy Donabedian. He hit puberty about 12 years before I did. And he was a grown man with a full beard as a sophomore in high school. I think I ended up growing 9 or 10 inches after he made the varsity team and was just clearly a better player than me at the time. So I spent my sophomore year on the JV team. I think I won MVP of the JV team as a catcher. But if I ever wanted to sniff the lineup on the varsity, I had to play somewhere else. So they got my bat in the lineup in left field. And when I went back to the high school a few years ago for them to retire my number, the old assistant coach from when I was there is now the athletic director at the high school. And he told me something that I never knew before, is that he had to fight for me to put me in the lineup in the outfield because I was so slow that the head coach wasn't even willing to put my bat in the lineup to risk how bad the defense might be. But I was willing, and luckily I had someone to fight for me to get my bat in the lineup, or my career might have stalled out before it even got started.
Interesting to think about moments like that. What's possible. There's all of these little moments and little things that happen that sometimes we know are happening, and sometimes we don't find out until much later, or we never find out that influence our success. One of the things, Ryan, that is just fascinating about your career and is just the resilience and the never give up kind of mindset. So many ups and downs throughout your career. If I have this right, you've been called up, sent down, traded, or released 26 times over the course of your Major League Baseball career. There's a lot of folks that endure some portion of that and then decide that baseball is not for them. Where did the resilience come from? Where did the courage to just keep going, and where did that come from?
I think it stems from my core value of like, find the best. And as long as I still felt there was good baseball, as long as I felt like I was still growing and getting better and aiming towards my best baseball is still ahead of me, I still got to grind. I still might earn an opportunity where I could stick for a while. I still might, hit enough where, maybe I'll make an all-star team was in the back of my head somewhere. Maybe I'll get on a winning team. We'll make another playoffs, or we'll win another World Series. Anytime I felt like I was still building towards my best, it's a value of mine. And then this past year, I had a baby girl, and my career for the last 5 or 6 years kind of plateaued. I was, a good AAA player and a backup big league guy, kind of an insurance policy that teams had to cash in for a couple weeks a year. But I had plateaued. And as soon as I started to slow down, like my bat speed maybe was a little bit slower, as soon as I started to lose a little bit of the motivation to get into the weight room and really, really push to keep getting better, that's when I knew it was time to do the next thing.
Were there people that you talked to through that process? Or was it something that you just kind of came to terms with on your own? Or did you see kind of outside perspectives and input from mentors, friends, coaches?
Lots of input. All my friends that I played with in high school or college that are in the professional world now and crushing it 15 years into their professional career, every single one of them said, dude, play as long as you can. Even former teammates of mine, former players in the big leagues that are now coaching or out of the game, they all encourage me, like, make sure you're absolutely ready before you take off that uniform, because it's not a decision you can take back.
Ryan, one of the things that I'm just fascinated by, obviously, like, there's the resilience piece, and there's just the kind of dusting the pants off and getting back up and taking what comes at you. But there's also just this uncanny ability that you have to navigate change and transition. I mean, to be called up, sent down, traded that many times over a professional career, to wear so many different uniforms, to be part of so many different organizations, there's so much change. I uncovered a cool little story about your call up from AA to AAA. I guess it was Pawtucket. You get there and none of your equipment's there, and you just kind of roll with the punches. You grab someone else's cleats, you grab somebody else's glove, and you just, an extra catcher's gear is sitting around, and you just roll with the punches. Is there, like, when things are going bad or not as expected, I should say, or you're in someplace new, are there just things that you're doing? Are there mantras you're saying to yourself? Or is there a process you're going through to just try and slow things down and take things as they come?
Well, it's certainly a skill that I had to learn over the years. It's not something that I was just born with. Certainly that AA story is a great example, because if I remember, I was in Portland, Maine, and the team was taking a long road trip to Erie, Pennsylvania to play in AA. And the team was going to fly, but in order to save money, which in the minor leagues it's harder to come by, they shipped all of our gear on like a U-Haul truck, and then we were going to get on a plane the next day. And that next day was when I got the call to go to AAA, which is a drive. So I drove from Portland, Maine to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. My gear is in Erie, Pennsylvania on a U-Haul truck. And I got to AAA. It was Luis Exposito. Was the guy. He was the AAA catcher who, in essence, I was getting called up to replace and to kind of take his role. So it was super generous of him to allow me to use the gear, or else I would have just had to sit the bench, I guess, and play the next day. But the stress level was high, right? I'm trying to make a good first impression while also taking the guy's gear who's I'm replacing. But over the years, you just learn to accept what is and don't try to change what is. Just do your best in the situation that you're given. And so many of my call-ups, I would be catching a guy for the first time as he came in from the bullpen. I didn't know his name yet. I don't know what pitches he throws yet. So you try to learn on the fly. And another mantra that I kind of developed over the course of the years was, even if you're put in a position to fail, you still have to find a way to succeed. Because ultimately, the only thing that matters is results. It doesn't matter that you tried hard. It doesn't matter that you were put in a position to fail. Like, results are all that matter. And that's not just in sports. This is universal. Like, if you are on a sales team and you're selling a product that just sucks, ultimately, the only thing that matters is your numbers, right? So you have to, even if you're in a situation to fail, still find a way to get the job done.
There are so many people who just kind of gravitate back to excuses. They want to emphasize all the reasons why they're not going to succeed, or why they shouldn't have succeeded, or what got in their way. At the end of the day, the only two things we can control are our attitude and our effort. I really believe that. And you got to roll. You got to roll with the punches. So it's a great segue. You talked about kind of running in there and kind of meeting the pitcher just before the game. One of the things I'm always fascinated by is the catcher position. There's so much that goes into it that I'm not sure everybody necessarily realizes. Obviously, you were a great hitter, but there's so much more to it. Talk about everything that goes into being a catcher, learning the pitchers, building relationships with the pitchers, managing the game. You're almost like the quarterback of a baseball team in many ways. And then, by the way, on the side, you actually have, you have to hit.
Yeah.
And that's a part of the equation. How did you balance it all?
So early in my career, I didn't do a very good job of balancing it. I was a hitter, especially on my way up through the minor leagues in college. And I was actually told by a single A manager that I was not good enough to catch some of our pitchers and that I would get exposed. And that was really an eye-opening conversation and something I needed to hear. I needed that feedback. I needed that honesty to really kick my focus and intention on the defensive side into another gear.
What did they mean by that, Ryan? Just if you don't mind elaborating, like what did they think wasn't good enough?
I was in a catching stance. I have some flexibility limitations in my hips and my ankles. So as a catcher, before I went to the one knee stance years later that you see so much and so often in major league games, I'm in a stance where I look like a turtle shell. My back is like the letter C. My ears or my shoulders are up by my ears. I'm locked up where I can't move laterally. I really just was in a stance that was unathletic. And these pitchers, they're throwing 97, 100 miles per hour. It's moving this way and that. And I just wasn't good enough. And he was right. And I'm so grateful that he was willing to have that hard conversation. And I'm so willing that I was in a place where I was willing and ready to listen to him and do something about it. And then, so that manager and I, the rest of that season, went one-on-one extra work every single day. So that by the end of the year, something that had been such a glaring and obvious weakness became maybe league average. I'm not going to sit here and say it was a strength, but I got to a point where now it didn't stick out like a sore thumb as a weakness.
So that's maybe some of the physical side of the catcher position and the way you approach the position and the stance and the body. What about the relationship with the pitchers and the game planning? Like that's just something that I'm a big baseball fan, but that's something I don't think I've ever gotten a real full appreciation for. Like, how much do you have to really get to know each pitcher and their individual game plans and their pitches? Sometimes, like you said, you're just going on the fly, but I would imagine you're really trying to build some degree of rapport.
Yeah, there's definitely a rapport that gets built. So the first thing you need to do is understand what a pitcher's trying to do, right? There's pitchers that are hard in, soft away. There's pitchers that are breaking ball first, fastball later. There's sinker ballers. There's four seam. I'm working at the top of the zone with a breaking ball at the bottom. Understanding what they're trying to do is the first step. And then understanding what language they speak in. And I don't mean English, Spanish, Japanese. I mean, like, what are his cues? And for me, that comes in paying attention to the conversations they're having with the pitching coach. Because if you're the catcher and if you're doing your job, you can reinforce the things that they're working on, reinforce the voice that the pitching coach is saying in his ear on the field. And a lot of times players hear it differently or hear it better and more willingly from a peer and a teammate than they will from a coach. There's been so many times in my career that the hitting coach and I don't speak the same language per se, but another hitter that's in it with me will. I'll go to my teammate before I'll go to the hitting coach. So understand what they're trying to do, understand the language they speak in, and then understand their physical cues as well, because there's a lot of conversation that goes on non-verbally between the pitcher and the catcher during the game. You can pat your shoulder, or you can, give a slow down, deep breaths signal. There's also like stay back. So many physical cues that if you can nip it in the bud immediately, then you don't walk a hitter. You don't have a bad inning, whereas you could fix it in a pitch or two just by giving a cue.
Brian, are there things that you're looking, like when you're just standing there watching the pitching coach and the pitcher have a conversation, what types of things are you looking for? Are you just trying to pick up on some of the vocabulary? Are you looking at the body language of the pitcher and how they're responding to the pitching coach? And then maybe that's something you can emphasize and reinforce. What are you looking for? Yeah,
both. So normally if the pitching coach stops a bullpen in the middle to coach, I'll walk out from the plate and listen, because I want to hear what he's saying and how he's saying it. And it's not just the words, right? Everybody hears feedback differently. Does this guy, does the pitching coach want to let the pitcher feel through it? Is he a feel guy, or is he an intellectual, understand it in words first? Or is he comparing, contrasting it to something else that he's doing? Is he making a bridge from another skill that he understands and kind of cueing from there? So there's 4 or 5 different ways people can understand. And I want to understand, and I want to be able to speak to him the way that he's going to understand it best.
it's so fascinating, Ryan, because I think this applies to so many things outside of sports, right? I mean, you think about just a business meeting. You think there's so much that's going on nonverbal that you can pick up on before the meeting even officially starts, after the meeting officially ends. What's the body language? There's the person across from you who's talking, but there's also 3 other people who aren't talking, and you can kind of look and see, well, what do they think? It's fascinating to me because I've never caught a bullpen session for a professional pitcher, but I think about a lot of these little things that you can pick up on that maybe others are missing, and those are ways that you can get an advantage in anything. Did someone, that whole concept of walking out when the pitching coach comes out during the bullpen, is that something that a coach taught you or a peer taught you, or it's something you just picked up on your own?
No, it's something that I kind of picked up on my own as I valued really starting to focus on my defense. So we talked about how I was a hitter early in my career, but honestly, my big league batting average and slugging percentage never lived up to what I did in college or what I did early in the minors. So I had to reinvent myself as a defense first guy, something that had been such a weakness, and turn it into the strength and my calling card in the second half of my career. And being the guy that's not going to only do the job physically from the defensive side, but also lead the pitching staff in a way that is meaningful was something that I really had to turn into my game.
Everybody's got opinions on the pitch clock that is in Major League Baseball now. I'm curious from your vantage point, like less about like your perspective on what it means for the game. What does it mean to a catcher, and how does it change the catcher's work with the pitcher and how they have to manage the game? And I'd imagine that there's a lot of adjustment going on right now.
Yeah, it changes a lot. And so does the pitch comm, where you're calling pitches electronically. So much of what I did, especially early in my career, was slowing the momentum down from a defensive perspective when things started to go the other way. Momentum is real. Momentum's tangible. You can feel it. When I was with the Red Sox coming up, especially with some of the young prospects, it was basically anytime someone got an extra base hit or got into scoring position, take a mound visit. Slow the game down immediately before it turns into anything. And you can't do that anymore. We used to have unlimited mound visits. I used to be able to get a new ball, walk around, go talk to them, do some signs. It's a totally different ball game now. You have to think faster. You have to be in better shape to make sure you can catch your breath and slow your heart rate down. It's a totally different game now.
Do you think that the nonverbal is going to become even more important because there's just less time to communicate?
I think the nonverbal, but so much of calling a game it goes into observing with your eyes, right? You go in with the game plan, you have, the pitches you want to call and what you think will work against a hitter. But so much of it is you play the game because we're humans. A pitcher that is a fastball breaking ball guy might not have his breaking ball on one day. So you got to be more fastball heavy and maybe you utilize what's typically his third pitch, his changeup. Or a hitter that typically crushes fastballs could be a mile late on the fastballs that day because he's not always at his best either. So you have to read what's happening. And when you're playing with your eyes and you have to process, what did I just see? He fouled it off to the right side, which tells me he's late, which tells me we should maybe go in because the perceived velocity is faster. But we're shifting and that doesn't really play into the shift. In the game situation, we don't want to let this guy beat us. There's so much that goes into it. And then if there happens to be a runner on base, you need to pick up the coach for the run control signs. And you're calling pitches electronically now, and maybe the pitcher shakes and he has a different opinion or he's seeing something different. There's just so much that has to happen, and now it has to happen all within 7 seconds.
And by the way, you've got to catch a 98-mile-an-hour fastball or a breaking ball, right? You make it sound so simple, Ryan. I think you listed 20 different things that you're thinking about while you're trying to catch a 98-mile-an-hour pitch.
Well, the physical part becomes almost second nature. By the time you get to the big leagues, you've heard the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours to make you an expert. You've been playing baseball, catching bullpens for hundreds of thousands of hours. The physical part becomes second nature, but the mental side of what are we seeing and how does today differ from yesterday or last time? That's why you play the game.
You talked a moment ago about almost the catcher position being a role that would give you some staying power. Even if the hitting wasn't working at the big league level, it would give you some options and opportunities. But if you really are honest with yourself, were there times when you would let the hitting frustrations kind of creep in and maybe distract you a bit behind the plate? Or were you able to really just wall that piece of your game to the side and focus on the task at hand as the catcher?
I think it's necessary that you separate them. And people talk about being able to separate it as a skill. That's something that I think I learned in college, more from the schoolwork to the athletics side of it. Because if I have 4 papers due next week, I'm not coming, like, the coaching staff was smart enough to not have practice that week. Like, you could lock yourself in the library, really focus on, exam period, get your papers in. And then when you go to the baseball field, you're not worried about the test tomorrow anymore. And so that's a skill I learned early. And it's really not something that I let leak in from one side or the other. Maybe base running, it wasn't a strength of mine, never was going to be a strength of mine anyway. I could still be frustrated about the hitting or the fielding. But when I was in the box, it was hitting, and I was behind the dish, it's catching now.
So were there cues, like when you would come back, you would strike out and it would just be an at-bat that didn't go the way you wanted, or you're putting on the catcher's gear? Was there something that you would do? Was there a cue that you would have for yourself to say, all right, we're going to cut that off and we're going to focus on this now? Or did it just happen naturally?
I think the mechanics of putting on the gear and taking off the gear, that was the transition period. You get to doing it pretty quick. So it's 12, 15 seconds of clip the knees, clip the thing, throw your mask on. The mask is on, new time. Mask is off, clip the gear off, drop them. As you put the batting gloves on, now it's hitting time again.
I'm wondering if there's something that, anybody listening can draw from this, which is really about creating routines and cues. Do you have like a pre-meeting routine? You show up to a Zoom meeting and you do this, and this, like the same thing over and over. Maybe it helps lock you in. I'm gonna think about that a bit, because I'm gonna try and figure out how can I apply that to my own life. Is there a catcher's gear that I could put on in my own life before times that I need to be focused? I think, when I think back to when I was commuting more, now I'm working a little bit more remotely, obviously, these last couple of years. But when I was commuting, the commute would almost be a time to kind of wall off what was going on at work, and then to get ready, to come home to my young girls. And I want to think about that some more. You've given me a lot to think about that kind of pre-whatever routine. I think that can be an important piece.
I kind of put that together until you phrased the question the way you did. But yeah, maybe the physical mechanism of putting the gear on put me in the catching perspective, and the physical mechanism of taking the gear off, now you can change what you're doing. There is probably something to that.
Ryan, one of the things that's just obvious in our conversation is how important being a good teammate is for you, right? Like, that catcher position is so much more selfless, I think, than people give it credit for. I read that you had a moment in your career where you say that your mindset shifted to focusing more on teammates and what the team needed than what was good for you. And that really is the everybody pulls the tarp mindset in one moment, right? I'm curious, how did that happen? Was that something that kind of came to you through a coach, through a teammate, a mentor? Where did that shift happen?
The first time that it was really brought up to me was from David Ross, who is the manager of the Chicago Cubs now. And he said that it happened for him. And I think it happened in the same way, of where he was an offensive player, and offense, all of a sudden it's one-on-one, right? You got to get yours. You got to win the competition, the one-on-one mano y mano battle with the pitcher. Hitting is more selfish. But then to be a good defender, to be a good catcher, like, your job is to make the pitcher as best as he can be. Your job is to be the general on the field. So it's almost necessarily selfless to be any good at that position. And as my hitting declined, as David's hitting declined in his own career, it's adapt or die. And you don't see a lot of guys that fill that backup catcher role in the big leagues without them being super likable, team first, bring positive energy to the dugout type of guys. I think it necessarily, that's the role. And I think it was something that I needed to change into, and something that allowed my personality and my good nature. I enjoyed that. In 2017, I played 18. I lose track. 2018, I played for the Pirates organization. And one of the things that they value is community engagement. And this is really where it kicked into another level for me, because now it wasn't just about our team. It was about our team and the community we played in. And for me, it's just about baseball is a sport, and it's fun and it's entertaining, but it can mean more to the community. And I ended up doing over 100 hours of community service during that baseball season. And that took my, the meaning of what I was doing to another level.
That's so interesting, right? Because you go out and you play baseball, and it's a game, and it's entertaining, and it's something that you've loved for a long time. But then, and you look around, I'm imagining as a minor leaguer, there's 5,000-6,000 people in the ballpark. And as a big leaguer, there's a lot more, and you look around and there's fans. But I would imagine that opportunity to get out in the community really cemented for you that this baseball team is more than just a baseball team. This is a way of life for people. This is something that, they wake up and they look at the sports section, or they play fantasy baseball. They pass this team from generation to generation. And it's, being a baseball fan has been a huge part of my life. It's something that was instilled in me on day one. My dad handed me, my parents, they handed me a baby Mets uniform and a Mets glove. And I've been a Mets fan ever since. And I'm imagining, like you said, it's powerful stuff. When you start to reflect, and maybe you've had a chance to fully reflect, maybe this is something that'll happen as you get further away from your playing days. What do you think the biggest lesson that you learned from baseball is?
Oh boy, deep. The biggest? I can give you the first one that comes to my mind is learn how to fail. Because you're gonna fail. Whether you're the best in the world, and you've heard it a million times, the best in the world fail 7 out of 10. But in my career, I fail 7 out of 10 on the field. And then the business of baseball, I got knocked down 26 more times. And I always think back to that quote from one of the Rocky movies where Rocky Balboa, he's older now, and he's talking to his son about, like, nothing's going to hit you as hard as life, right? Life's not a fair place. And it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up. And as long as you are connected to why you are doing what you're doing and have a purpose that's bigger than just what's happening today, you can keep fighting the good fight, keep going towards that goal, keep working towards your purpose, no matter how hard it gets.
What an important message, Ryan. I've had so much fun. Your story is just so cool. I think you can learn from it regardless of where you are in your career, what you do. It's a story that I know you're gonna keep telling. I mean, from outfielder to catcher, from Yale to the big leagues, to the Olympics, to Team Israel, 15 years in professional baseball, parts of 10 major league seasons, so many organizations that you've impacted, community service. Ryan Lavarnway, what an awesome story. You, no question, are a tarp puller. I do know that you also pulled the tarp literally here and there.
So many times I got the text of, hey, we're going to try to have practice today. Everyone get to the field and pull a tarp.
You know what it's all about then. And you are a certified tarp puller here in the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family right now. I could talk to you for hours, Ryan. We'll have to do a part 2 sometime and check in on the next phase of your journey, which I know you will continue to make an impact through all these principles and lessons that you've learned in baseball and beyond. So thanks for pulling the tarp, and we'll have to catch up again soon. All right, Ryan?
Hey, anytime you want me, I'll be back. That was fun.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today's a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.